Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio, the show about ways to stay competitive in a changing market, break through business plateaus, and respond to the changing expectations of today's customers. Your host, Jess Dewell, is a rapid growth entrepreneur, consultant, and business advocate with a 20-year track record of business excellence. She candidly discusses how to achieve your growth strategy and realize your company's unfulfilled potential. Now, here's Jess.
You are in the right place for conversations about current needs that we as business leaders face, especially regarding technology, customer expectations, and quickly changing markets. This program is about what it means to reach our short-term goals and increase confidence in our long-term positioning. Program 181, Is Your HR Team Caught in the Middle?, is something that has been in the making for just a little while. Mark came to me with this idea, whom you've seen on the show before, and he said, not only do I have a lot to say about this, my friend and colleague Therese also does. And the thing is our HR team caught in the middle? Do we fully utilize them? If we don't have an HR team yet, when is the right time to get one? I mean, these are going to be all types of questions that helps us take a look at the internal positioning of our company so that we are best positioned outward facing to reach the growth strategy goals that we have. So let me introduce you to Mark and Therese. Mark Carruthers is a change facilitator and has worked in 9 industries, including agriculture, construction, wholesale distribution, and high tech. He's been both an entrepreneur and employee. Therese Van Es is an energetic, enthusiastic, highly motivated HR professional who enjoys hands-on management and engaging with employees. Her work to date culminates in her firm, Ladder, HR for small businesses. Mark, Therese, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jess. It's good to be here again.
Good. I am glad to hear it. So, and I'm telling you, even right before we started recording, there was so much energy in the green room. Not for me. I'm working on getting healthy again. However, with you, you are bringing it today. You are showing up, Mark and Therese, and I just want to get started, and we're going to jump right in. I've noticed that HR has been taking a lot of social media criticism lately. What are your thoughts about that?
Therese, you want to lead off?
Yeah, sure. I'll lead off with that. First of all, thank you, Jess. Thank you for welcoming me. I'm really happy to be here to be part of this. You know, I think that some of the social media criticism, and I'm going to get lambasted for this, I know, is actually well-deserved.
Okay.
Because, I know, right? Right. So here's what happens. Sort of a lot of the old school HR professional people went to school and they're personnel. So now they're in these organizations and they want a seat at the table, and they want a seat at the table as they push their transactional HR through, right? So they're doing performance evaluations, which is, fine. They're doing compensation, and they're doing training, and they're doing health and safety, but they want a seat at the table. Well, that's all well and fine. That's not how you get a seat at the table. That's more of an HR administrative function. So when we hear bad things or crazy things, in my view, about the HR profession, it's more about, they want a seat at the table, but they don't know what they're doing, or, they're just the dress code police, or things like, they just want to rate us. They want to rate us on a scale of 1 to 5. Well, yeah, of course, if that's going to happen, we're going to get bad press.
Okay, so may I jump in? I want to say, so I hear two roles that are at conflict that most of us only see one side of, which is the transactional side, but there's also an administrative side, correct?
Well, to me, transactional and administrative are the same. There's more of a growth strategy side plus a transactional administrative side.
Got it. Okay.
I think that has evolved over time, because certainly for a long time it was transactional only. That's how it basically originated, where HR was the executive management's right hand as far as managing staff and establishing procedures and policies and enforcing them and keeping attendance, as was said. And this is the problem, whether it's HR or HR as an extension of management or management. I think part of the issue that we hear on social media is the fact that so many take the old style, the old purposes of these functions, and not just the people who are looking at it, but the HR or the management people themselves. And I think this is part of the issue.
Tell me more about that.
Yes, please. That's where I was going to. I didn't quite understand what you meant by the end piece there, Mark.
So many of management expect HR roles to still be the old traditional,
Right.
look after attendance, look after, well, there's an issue. Why didn't you deal with this? Well, you should do it because you're management, I'm HR. But so many of them, I don't know how many times I was told, well, I don't have to deal with this. I've got an HR person. I shouldn't have to deal with this. And they're the managers with the issues with their staff. And too many of the management, too many of the HR people are still willing to accept those roles and haven't evolved into what HR should be and how to use them best.
Okay. Go ahead, Therese.
You bring up a good point, Mark. And what I've learned since becoming a consultant versus working in corporate HR is that a lot of the smaller organizations need you to be that person. So I'm working right now with 3 different organizations who are sort of on the verge. They're not on the verge. They're still too small for a full-time HR person. And what I'm finding is that because I'm working with the owners of the organizations, they do need me to police, and that's a terrible term to use, but to uphold the standards of the organization. That's really what they need me to do, because they don't have time to do it. They've set a culture, they've set their standards, they don't have time to do it. On the flip side, also with these organizations, I am working at building their long-term strategic plans and looking at long-term workforce planning. So it's interesting in that sense. As much as I try and coach, when there just is no time, somebody has to do it. However, having said that, in the large organizations where you can have an HR person, HR should not be the police. Absolutely not. HR's role is to come out and discuss with the leaders of the organization how they can better prepare their employees to be strong players, rather than have HR police them. So there are kind of 2 different sets of, I'm going to say, HR rules, depending on the type of company that you're in. But even the smaller organizations that I work with now, it's not even so much it's an HR rule. One of the owners of one of the organizations came to me and said, Therese, we were going to hire a business manager, but you're really our business manager as well. Because I take that on because I know it has to be done. Because you still can't let somebody walk around with inappropriate things on their clothing. And if the management's not going to do it, when we look at the organization as a whole and we want to move the culture forward into a certain direction, somebody has to do it, right?
Well, isn't that interesting? Because culture being the center of most organizations, whether they own it or not, it's still the culture. And so one of the things that I hear coming from both of you, Mark and Therese, is that the smaller the organization, the easier it is to just say, well, we don't have time for that. Why should we have to do that? And they're looking for a person to take care of those things. And it goes back to that delegation versus dumping concept that a lot of small businesses, especially that are owner-driven, when they're getting close to that, having to switch from being owner-driven to team-driven, that HR, it sounds like that's a critical point for HR as well. And I find it curious because if it's in a smaller organization like what you were talking about, Therese, they're not big enough to have a full-time HR person. Okay, I get that. And the thing is, though, wouldn't their culture be being set in stone as they're growing, and that whatever they're shaping themselves to be in the role of HR at the size they are now, when they hit that next level or the next level after that, that culture is going to be there regardless of their size now?
Yes. And unfortunately, that's when most organizations decide they need HR. Even a part-time HR. Usually we get to an organization's been in existence for a number of years, and they've been led by the owners, and the owners don't have time to do everything. So the culture is, this is what we do. So by the time you bring in an HR person and they tell you, okay, we want to change the culture, it's like, oh dear.
Right.
Oh, You know, we really need to set these things up right from the beginning, which is why if you have any designs, or if any organization has any designs for growth or advancement, they really need to bring in a consultant right at the get-go to talk about what the rules should be and how they're going to be.
That's music to my ears.
Well, I'm glad.
Not only because I have a change agent and an HR professional right here, that's what I do.
Awesome.
Whatever point you bring me in, what's that role? Hold the vision and put everything back on that. Well, when we put this in the space of the vision and the mission, here's what comes back. When we put this in the place of the values that have been set, here is what comes back. And when it's not, when what comes back is different than what's actually happening, therein lies this big gap. And that's hard to change. And when we're talking about growth and we're talking about employee engagement, we're talking about mobilizing employees, wanting to build these leadership programs from the inside out, from the earliest stage to mid-stage to established stage organizations. I find it fascinating that there's a perception of HR in each of those roles, when in reality, isn't it just like the same all the way across? Regardless of size, regardless of number of employees?
I think the problem is the transition time period from a sole proprietor who just hired their first person or a couple of people, and how they have managed and how they have established their own culture as individuals. And sometimes, you know, they're great because they are nice people, they're good managers, or good leaders, but sometimes they're not. And they just want people who are going to do the work and get it done and pay the consequences if they don't do it up to standard and all the rest of it. And the culture can be established either way. And when all of a sudden you bring in a consultant because the entrepreneur, you know, has these first couple of people and they're trying to change the culture because they can sense that maybe things aren't going as well as they should be, and I need to step back and go run the business, go develop the business, and let somebody else do it, even on a part-time consultative basis. That's when things start to change, and certainly probably should. But sometimes the culture has been set, and that's a tough thing to overcome.
So do we need a new bar? This is what HR is today, because when we run our businesses I'm going to use the word traditional versus old school, in a traditional fashion of growth and what takes priority and how it takes priority, what does this new bar look like that we can all benefit from implementing changes from exactly where we are? And maybe we're thinking about starting out. Maybe we're at that critical growth point to that next level of business. This is where I'm very keen and curious to hear the tips for what do we need HR to be in our organizations for success from right now going forward. Let's set a new standard.
I love the idea of setting a new standard. With that, I like the idea of breaking apart HR. I just want to break it wide open and say, listen, there really are two different models of HR, because we still need the transactional, right? We need somebody to take care of payroll and benefits and health and safety. So why don't we break it apart and create another genre of HR that's really not called HR? And, you know, some people have tried that. They've tried human capital management. Well, you know what? We're people, you know. So the people who have gone out on a limb and have started with people and culture, to me, really have a good understanding of what it is we need in an organization. So where's the bar? Where do we start? When do we start? We start at the very beginning. We bring in the transactional HR people when we need them, and we need them forever and ever. The lovely thing about the people and culture people is they can come in and out of your organizations as we go. I mean, ideally, yes, when you're a large organization, you have that one person who really understands your organization. They've been there for a while. They understand the mission, vision, values. They understand how the C-suite operates. They understand all of that, and they have a really good ear for the culture. But the reality is, too, in today's business climate, is that everybody wants to do more with less. So by doing more with less,
true,
right? That's true. But that's where sort of the newer HR person, who in my view really is just a business person with a different specialization, right? So accountants are specialized with numbers. The new HR person is specialized with people. And that doesn't mean we're all soft and fuzzy. We're still business people who are actually identifying with creating a positive impact on the bottom line. End of story. That's what we do.
So yeah, keep going.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, so to bring Mark back into this, I'm very curious, Mark. It seems like maybe the need for a change agent would be necessary in every organization now and again, right? Come in, shift things up a little bit, mix up the pot, see where things are really strong, where they're weak, and make some priorities around that. When we need that, we might be able to go outside and find it. We also might be able to look inside and find it. What do change agents look like and sound like, and how do we tap that potential?
Well, as you indicated, change agents can be either from the internal sources who know the business very well, or they can be a fresh set of eyes from the outside to have an objective third-party view, and not just at the symptoms, because too often people who are involved in the business are simply looking at the symptoms rather than the root of the problem. In the same respect, a lot of them don't want to know the root because too often, they are, or people within the organization. Statistics will tell you that 67% right now of the people in the US say they are unhappy in their workplace. And how do we change that? The thing is that the people within the corporations aren't necessarily going to want to look in the mirror and say, yeah, I'm the cause. Whereas somebody else will come in with a fresh set of eyes, and their objective is to be a catalyst for changes, but they've got to look past the symptoms and look at really what the root of the problem is and see if we can change it from the beginning. Then what you've got to do is, once you decide what the true issues are, try to get both parties being, and I'm saying it's two parties, the staff, the workers, or whatever, and management or owners, getting them thinking along the same line and buying into the need for a change and agreeing, each giving input. The change agent has to listen to what each is saying and try to come with some sort of middle ground. They have to mediate in a lot of cases because you've got two opposing views usually on how things should be done. It so often is the case. And they've got to try to bring the two together to work together to achieve the mission, the goals of the business. And that's, once the issues have been determined, the underlying issues, that's probably the toughest role, is to get people to buy in. And that's what a change agent needs to do, is not just organize what's going to happen or what should happen, but to get people to buy in. That's probably the toughest role after determining what the issues are.
You are listening to The Voice of Bold Business Radio. In every program, we share stories, tips, and concepts that benefit short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. For additional perspectives on your growth strategy, Jess Dewell is your business advisor and consultant. Go to voiceofboldbusiness.com and click the Find Out More button to get started. Now, back to Jess.
So as we're setting this up, and we're going to dig deeper because time flies so fast when we're talking about something that, one, we care about, two, we want to learn more about. I'm thinking about one of the things that I've heard both of you say, and that's, who assumes the role of HR? When there is no formal department, or everybody's wearing all the hats, or even in a larger organization where there's enough of something that it's time to have a part-time or a full-time person fulfilling some of the roles, taking some of that responsibility. How do we recognize that point so that we can plan for it and be a little ahead of the game instead of catching up from behind?
Mark, I'm sure that you have been in this position because, Jess's question is, who assumes HR? It's generally finance, right, Mark?
Absolutely, yes. I have seen it more than once in the case of upsizing and downsizing both, where HR was the last thing to be brought in and the first thing to be cut. And who gets left with the HR role? Usually the people in finance or operations or that sort of thing. And
you know what happens then? Yeah. Then we get transactional HR, right? Because people in finance and operations are specialized in finance and operations. People in HR specialized in HR. So what happens is everything falls away. All the culture leadership initiatives fall away, and you're left with somebody who is managing payroll and terminations and looking at legislation and health and safety and all the very transactional pieces. And I suppose that's okay if we're going downward and we're going to close our business. But if we are releasing people or laying people off with the intent that we're going to come back and move forward, if you don't have somebody specially trained in the area of culture management, we're just going to get transactional, right?
But I think this goes back to your comment about, HR wanting a seat at the table, and management has had that seat because of the finance side of it. The comments that you read on social media and that you hear about management are usually related to how they treat their employees. Management, in most cases, needs to learn how to do some HR functions, but HR has to learn and understand the business side of it and not just the people, and how getting people to work will create a bottom line and understand the financial aspect of it. So it's a case of improving both HR and management by knowing a little more about the other and doing some training. Myself, I've had coaching training, I've had HR training. I'm not a certified HR by any stretch, but I have a better idea of how to relate to people. And then probably most managers, I've always taken into consideration as a manager when I was involved in HR, and many of the people that I know who have been in finance or in management that have had to assume HR roles, they have a better understanding than most, I think, in industry, because this is what I hear all the time, is how how managers poorly treat their people. And that has to do with the HR function of being able to have empathy with their people, to understand, to care about what they say and do and the reaction from the people. And I don't know.
I'm going to disagree with you there, Mark.
Okay. Go on.
Surprise. I'm going to disagree with you because
not a first.
No, not a first time. Won't be the last either. It's okay. We can still be friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I'm hearing you say is HR knows how to handle people and knows how to manage people. Sure, well and fine, but we don't take courses in that, right? Like, this is the thing. That's the sort of the old notion of HR. The reality is that people are people, and we have really good people managers in operations people and finance people and HR people and science people and engineers, and we have really poor managers also within HR. Trust me, I have seen many, many poor HR people who are not good managers of people. The difference is what you can do with the strategic pieces of the organization. So it's not so much even, we all have to relate to people well, but we all have to relate well with one another. We all have to understand that treating John Smith differently than Abigail Jones is a bad situation if they're both doing the same work, if we're paying them differently. Those are laws. We all treat them the same. HR really is trained that the HR professionals these days, we don't take psychology courses. We take courses in finance. We take courses in marketing. We do take courses in training and development and in compensation and benefits. Our education these days is much, much more well-rounded than it was 30 years ago when you got an HR certificate by being a personnel person, right?
Yes,
absolutely. It was a personnel manager. So, but as far as managing the people, HR's role is as a coach and a mentor, because oftentimes we get into positions where we're better able to manage people. But having said that, two of my best mentors for me personally in my career are engineers. And they knew how to manage people. They were very kind and considerate. They just had it. And it's very difficult to train it, right? By far, they have been the two, and one of them is still my mentor, and they're both engineers, and they're both presidents of companies. You know what I mean? So it's not up to HR to treat people nice. It's up to HR to remind people to treat people nice, but everybody needs to get that skill set.
But that goes back to what we hire for, which we'll get into, I'm sure, which is soft skills.
Right, agreed.
Managers need better soft skills, and some HR people do too.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, for sure, you are right.
And I think and let's pause at this. What if we threw out the role of a manager 20 years ago was fundamentally different than the role of a manager today. I go into organizations, and on a regular basis, whatever the manager role is, it's the phrase that I hear is working manager. I've got my own full-time roles and responsibilities. And by the way, I have 10 people reporting to me. And unfortunately, the 10 people reporting get prioritized at the bottom because it's the least easy to measure the results of our time and energy spent there. It is the most impactful. It creates the longest term sustainability, but on a short or a regular schedule, they're the hardest metrics to measure. So we have these managers that have also a bunch of responsibilities that make the world happen in the business every day. And then we also have how all of this happens. And so this concept of a working manager and being able to relate to people, I feel like those roles are in conflict. Do you see that in the areas that you're working in?
Yes, only because it's not so much that the roles are in conflict, but we're again going back to having to do more with less. I think that's why this has happened, right? We're streamlining processes. We have to do more with less. So let's give the managers 10 people to manage plus do your own job. And this is the organizations that I've been in, the ones that are really doing well and moving forward well, actually give managers time to manage. You know, like what I would recommend is 50%. If you're a manager of a department of more than 5 people, you need 50% of your time.
Yeah.
To really. Did I scare you with 50%?
No, I'm on board. I thought it would be more.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, I'm being conservative, but yeah, you need at least 50% of your time to break it apart. Otherwise, you're managing 10 employees, and then your employees become disgruntled and you don't have time for them. And then they say the company's not fair with them and their managers don't love them. And the culture around here is terrible.
Leader poster things are the result. Those things drive me crazy. I think that is the biggest. Somebody just had a bad day and they come up with that, and everybody else is like, I guess I've had that bad day too. So let's make this the norm.
Yeah. The thing that what I tell people is, we are people. We're all people. Whether you're the call center person on the floor or whether you're the CEO, we're all people. We all want to be treated with dignity and respect. That shouldn't be that difficult. But that doesn't have anything to do with HR. That has to do with being people.
That's right.
As an HR professional, I am looking at how the managers are managing, because if they're not managing well, they're negatively impacting their bottom line. And that's what I really care about.
Yep.
Right? So how do I turn that around on a per manager basis? So I don't know if I've answered your question or gone off topic. Sorry about that.
The answer is, I think it's perfectly relevant. What it made Mark think of something. What did you want to add, Mark?
No, all I was going to say was that this whole concept of treating people nice with respect and all the rest of it, that sort of crosses all generations. You know, everybody's saying, oh, you got to treat millennials different than you do boomers and generation X, Y, Z, and whatever the next ones are coming, alpha. You know, being human and treating people with respect and dignity and empathy and that sort of thing will cross all those generations and be well received by any of them. And yes, you have to still consider that the priorities and what's important in their lives and what motivates people at 25 with no kids versus 35 with, you know, small children versus 55 with no kids again. That has all changed, or has changed, and each one has different priorities, and you've got to treat them somewhat differently, but still the basic idea of treating people well and with respect crosses all generations, in my opinion.
It does, you know, and I agree with you, Mark. We're all tiptoeing around the millennials, but well, let's just be nice like we are to each other. Let's talk with them. Let's find out what they want, just like what the boomers want, just like what the new Gen Zs want. Let's figure it out. But what they want is fundamentally the same. We want respect. We want to be heard. There are some differences, absolutely. You know, we know the millennials versus the aging boomers.
So what respect looks like and sounds like varies a little bit from generation to generation. And I do believe that the concept of business and business structures and how And it's just because organizations take a long time to change, and that's okay because there's many people coming together. There's a lot of people that have to change a habit, not just one. It's not like we're going to go out and make a new habit for ourselves and expect everybody else to just automatically follow suit. We have to be that change maker that Mark was describing earlier in the program for other people. And so I'm interested in that because this is where I think the crux of the problem is that yes, we're all people. Yes, there's a transactional function. Yes, there's a mentoring and an agency role of let's look and see where can we improve monetarily, beneficially, in profitability, wherever, by how we're doing those things. Yet the way that business is done is slow to change. And so I think we're in this really interesting gray area where, of course, all the criticism is welcomed and well-deserved, and all of the praise is welcome and well-deserved because they're all true. If you think about that, they're all true because we haven't crossed that tipping point of this setting that new bar that we had mentioned earlier. And so I find that part fascinating. So when we have this concept of dissenter, right? People who don't feel loved, people who outwardly complain, people who fear in some capacity when they're working, does that allow the company itself to have a net positive or a net negative perception in all of employees and in the marketplace?
I'm not sure I understood the question exactly.
Are dissenters positives or negatives, or are they good, bad, indifferent? How do we treat dissenters?
Dissenters from the internal perspective as well as dissenters from an external perspective. So if I've got a dissenter in the company, how does it affect my company? If I've got a dissenter in the company, how does it affect how my customers see my company?
Interesting. What I've experienced is dissenters in the company quite often spark change. Because if you've got one vocal dissenter, there are others who just aren't vocal. And oftentimes, it sparks change that is positive. Not always. Sometimes having a dissenter in the company brings everybody down. Depends on how the dissenter, he or she, presents themselves, right? Completely. If we've got a dissenter who comes forward and says, I really do not agree with A, B, C, and D, and these are the reasons why, and maybe we can change them by doing this, that's all well and fine. But if you've got one in the organization who will not come forward and spreads their web out to just the people around them and they all start to chat among themselves, then we have a real problem.
Yeah, exactly. There's different types of dissenters. There are constructive dissenters and there are toxic dissenters. And as you said, if they are coming forward and identifying issues and problems and solutions, as opposed to just complaining all the time and creating issues with their coworkers and hurting morale otherwise, and perhaps extending it to the clients and customers that you have, that you've got to do something about. You can't have that happening because that spreads like wildfire and it just hurts your business, period. In the same respect, if you've got dissenters who are pointing out issues with solutions, yes, it can be an absolute positive, and they should be utilized.
All the parenting books I have ever read are starting to pop into my brain as I'm listening to the two of you right now. Honestly, isn't that what that is all about? When we're raising kids, what are we doing? We're allowing the messiness to occur and directing it in a certain way, sometimes a little more harshly than others based off of the impact or danger or whatever. And that actually is what we do in organizations too, isn't it? That's what I hear you saying, Mark.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly, I have said before that I've told people that were in my office, you're not a 5-year-old in a playground. You are an individual here with responsibilities and expectations of you, and you have expectations of us. And we've got to have you deliver in such a way that it works for both of us and without impacting other people. But I have told people you'd act like a 5-year-old.
So I could also take responsibility then. HR's out there, my company's out there, and here I am in this role somewhere in the middle. I could be frontline, middle, top, doesn't matter. And I see this, and if all of a sudden I hear myself going, right, whatever that sounds like, the words that go with that, so where's my responsibility in that? Is that a good self-reflection of anybody in the organization? As soon as I take responsibility and recognize I also have a part in my that I can actually decide what I want to do about it.
You're moving into the realm of emotional intelligence, right?
Of course.
And as much as I would love to tell you that everybody that I've ever worked with wants to take ownership, the reality is that there are very few people who look inside themselves and say, okay, if I'm in this mess, why am I in this mess? Is there something I can do to get out? Most of the time, unfortunately, people are shouting and throwing blame. However,
can I say I still do that too? I am the best tantrum thrower I know. And I will totally blah, blah, right? Whatever it is, doesn't matter. And then I go, okay, now that I got it out, now I can actually see what's happening. Now I can actually experience what's happening. I will be glad to reflect. But I also honor my tantrums.
But you recognize that. It's right. You recognize that. Like this is like an Oprah moment. We could be on Oprah right now talking about this, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I get a car?
Yeah.
I don't know what car it is today, but I'm in. No, but that's exactly right. And again, getting back to the fact that we're all people and we all behave differently and we all come with different life stories and we all come with different baggage and we all come with different experience and we bring it all into the workplace. And then we say, HR, you need to fix it all. Well, no, hang on here.
Right. Hello, no. Mirror.
Yeah, that's right. Like if your culture is this way, HR is not going to change it until you, Mr. Owner, changes things. We can help you change. We can reorganize. We can rewrite your job descriptions. We can reprocess. We can change the flow of how some of the work processes are done. We can do all of that. But unless Mr. Owner or Mr. CEO changes how they behave outwardly, the culture will not change.
Absolutely. If you got somebody in the central view of everybody acting a certain way, it's infectious. They're going to reflect that. And it's so tough to get those people, even as a change facilitator, to try to give them the bad news that, hey, you're the root of the problem. You're not helping this, you're hurting it, and you've got to change. A lot of them don't want to hear that. And this is one of the toughest things, whether you're the HR manager or a change facilitator or someone who is a dissenter that is saying, hey, we got a problem here and you got to do something about this. This process needs to change because people are unhappy, people are not working well together, and it's causing problems with morale and that sort of thing. That's what makes it difficult if the owners don't buy in and don't reflect what they want things to be or how they want things to be. If they don't reflect it, it's not going to be the way they even dream that it could be.
So put a stake in the ground already. Everybody who's listening, put your stake in the ground now, and stand next to it. So that makes me curious then, Therese. HR has an agency, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with the word agency, the representation and the best interests of a party. And so HR's agency is to the company, to protect the company, to develop the company, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. For several reasons. One, we are business people first and foremost. I know people think we're psychologists and psychoanalysts and whatever. We're not. We're business people first and foremost. And when we're involved in any organization, our primary responsibility is to take care of the company. So what does that mean, right? Other than people's and processes and things, it also means legislation. It also means making sure that we do have the proper training in place, because heaven forbid we have a violence and harassment complaint, right? Oftentimes people will come into my office and say, Therese, I really need to talk to you. And I sit back and I say two things. One is, do you want me to do something about it, or do you just want to vent? And if they say vent, I send them off to their mother or their father or their spouse. And if they say, I'd like you to do something about it, I say, then this conversation is not confidential, because I can't do anything otherwise, right? So when we talk about agency, that's why I tell them that, because first and foremost, the business is paying me. I'm an employee of the business. My job is to make sure that do everything I can to ensure a profitable impact for the business. I don't think it can be any other way. Now, do I stand on the fence a lot of the times because maybe the employee feels they're not treated fairly and maybe really they're not? But you know what? That's agency for the business, because if the employee's not being treated fairly, we're going to get a human rights complaint, or we're going to get an EEOC complaint, or a Ministry of Labor complaint. So while it looks like I might be favoring the employee, it is not true. I'm favoring the situation, looking at the best possible outcome for the organization.
I'm telling you, I think that in itself, that particular answer, like, sums up everything that we've talked about. That when we understand in the end what our role is, and in this case today, we're talking about HR, what the role of HR is, how it impacts the company, how there are benefits for employees and managers to develop as people, both individually and as teams. Also, the success and the survival of the organization come down to all of these things that tend to be less measurable, thought of after the fact, and typically, though, need to be in place ahead of the game, because it's the stuff that's after the fact that's going to take us most by surprise and knock us most off of our paths in our growth and strategy goals. So thank you for sharing that. All right, I want to know from both of you, what makes it bold to set modern expectations for HR?
Managers, HR, and change facilitators have to change what they're doing from what they've done for so many years. They have to change their methodologies to take into consideration the interactions of people with the people they work with ownership, with processes, with everything else, to make it better for everybody, to the benefit of the business, to the growth of the business, and ultimately to the profitability of the business. Because if a business isn't profitable, they're not going to stay around. And there's got to be some changes. Both or all management, HR, and any change facilitators that are trying to make things better have to be held accountable and hold themselves accountable for trying to move this all forward.
And I'll just add to that a little bit, because I love your answer. I think the sort of the bold about HR moving forward might go back to something else that I said a little while ago, is let's break it apart and redesign it, right? Let's put the transactional process piece over here, and let's put the organizational structure, strategic piece over here, and call them something different. We'll call them something different, and then people can choose, because there are many people in the transactional process-driven HR that love being there, and they are very much needed for any organization. Then there are people over here who are more people-driven, to change culture, to redesign how the org chart looks, to look at strengths and weaknesses, and to look at training and mentoring employees and moving employees into roles that we know through, maybe with some training, will help the organization. They're very different people. So when we're talking about, let's be bold in HR, let's break this thing apart and call these guys over here HR, because that's what they've always been. And let's find a new name. Maybe it's people and culture development. Maybe it's talent management, which sounds kind of blah, blah, blah. I like bold, like people and culture development better.
Well, I had somebody write something recently on social media. They commented, why do people and management call their staff and the people that work there resources? Resources are their raw materials, are their fixed assets, are their whatever. Don't call them resources. That's not.
And I'm with you. I don't like resources. I don't like direct reports. I don't like my staff. That one really irks me. No. In any organization, the CEO is no more important than the call center person. And you know what? Without the call center person, the CEO doesn't have a job. But without the CEO, the call center person doesn't have a job either. Right. It goes both ways. We end up at different places on the pay scale, on the hierarchical ladder, because of our experience and because of our education, because of the choices we make. It doesn't make us more or less important. Right. It just makes us different, which is what we need to make a company work.
You will find all the program notes at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P181. That is voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 181. You may also search the site for Is Your HR Team Caught in the Middle? All right. You've heard Mark, you've heard Therese, and it's your turn to keep the conversation going, Tell us what you think. Use hashtag VBB Radio. What are your experiences? If you're an HR professional, how do you feel about this concept of this new standard, a modern HR, and being a business owner, being an executive, being a customer service person or a salesperson or a marketing person, wherever you happen to be in an organization? What do you think the role of HR is today, and how do you see it actually being developed and enacted within your organization? Now, rate this program on iTunes, iHeartRadio, YouTube, wherever you happen to be watching. And while you're there, subscribe so you can get the next show and the next show after that. So we can learn from not only our experiences, Therese's experiences, Mark's experiences. We don't have to have those experiences firsthand. We can take them, we can learn from them, and we can pull the best and apply it to future situations without having to go through all the hard knocks of learning that tend to happen. So let's leverage that. Let's work on that. Let's help ourselves and help others at the same time. So make sure you're practically applying the information that you have heard today. And I'm curious, how will you change your view of HR so your HR team is not caught in the middle?
The voice of Bold Business Radio gives you insights about how to achieve your company's growth strategy. When you aren't seeing the growth results you want, it's time to get an outside perspective. To discuss your specific situation around growth strategy, work with us. Visit voiceofboldbusiness.com and click Find Out More. Special thanks to the Scott Treatment for technical production. Thank you for joining us.